Hey everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We're here live with our latest update to the listening tour, and I have here 6 members of the NYPD with me. So thank you for participating. When we go around, you can say whatever you want about yourself. As always, this is unscripted. So I think the one thing though I have to get out right away is it's been a heck of a year. It's been a heck of a year for all of us, for New York City as a whole, and certainly for the police department. So Larry, you're the elder statesman of the group. What's your, and that's a compliment, Larry.
Thank you.
What's your takeaway on what we've seen this last year?
This year has been it's been a crazy year between the pandemic, policing, everything that's going on in the country. It's a time for healing and getting back to normalcy, which I think what's hurting everybody today. What we used to do yesterday, we can't do today.
Well, I don't think there's anything to argue with that. The question is, what does that look like, and how do we get there? So, Rochelle, what's your take?
With all the changes that's happening, I think it's important that we have conversations, of course, with our officers in the precincts and within the community, and try to get everyone on the same page, let them understand, okay, these are the changes that's happening, this is how it's going to affect you as a community, this is how it's going to affect you as a cop, and just so that everyone has that thorough understanding, opposed to just going off of media headlines of what things might be, which sometimes is not really what, those headlines are. It's actually more to it.
Yeah. Cole, what do you think? You're the 2 or 3 years on the job, right? Work in Staten Island. What's been your experience this past year?
As Larry said, we're facing multiple concurrent crises, and that presents a unique set of challenges in and of itself. But I think we're at a critical juncture, not just in New York City, but all across the country, where we are, as a nation, redefining and reimagining what it means to be a police officer in the United States. So, it's a robust conversation that needs to be had. The debates will be contentious, but I think that's part what a robust democracy demands. I think it's so important that as we go through this immense endeavor, we're talking about fundamentally changing the way we police in the United States. I think we incorporate all the voices and make sure that everybody feels like their voice is being heard and recognized, and that goes from the community to clergy to our elected officials, but most importantly to the police officers as well, because I know a lot of the officers do feel like at this time their voices aren't being heard as much, and that's sort of the frustration that really is resonating.
Can you expand on that a little bit? I was going to go to Erica, but I got to ask you to expand on that. Yeah. What do you think isn't being heard, and by whom? Absolutely.
So I think that as far as officers go, the perception in the community, I think officers feel as though the tremendous amount of responsibility and the pressure that we face on a daily basis, that's not as recognized, and that's not to diminish the perspective of the community at all. I think it's hard for them when you're asking someone to understand what they can't see, and I think so often members of the community, the question that I get asked the most is, what is it like? What is it like out there, especially now, especially today, to be an officer? It must be tough. And so they're yearning for this connection. They're yearning to understand what it is our officers are going through. And they want to be a support, they want to give us that benefit of the doubt, but when all they see is snippets of the most tragic encounters, that really, if that's the only basis that they have to form an opinion and a perspective, that makes it incredibly difficult. So that's what I mean by, it feels like our voices aren't necessarily being heard. All the tremendous and good work that members of the service are doing, it's getting overlooked.
Erica, Cole mentioned something there about everything that we faced this year and then some, right? Between the pandemic and coming out of the murder of George Floyd, the protests, and the difficult year we've had. But you also go home at the end of the day, and you deal with all of those things too. How do you balance that? Your personal life with the job life when you take that uniform off?
Yeah, so one of the greatest things is having a good support system. And thank goodness, my husband's not on the job, so he sees things differently. I have 2 older children, they're in their 20s, so they see things differently. They're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they look at all these different things, and to hear their perspective and to know that mom goes out, puts on the uniform, and has to deal with that. And then seeing mom at home, cooking, cleaning, or hanging out with them and having conversations in regards to everything that we're dealing with. it sometimes becomes a little difficult. You know, and then speaking to the other female officers on this job, right? Yes, my kids are older, so I'm able to have a little more flexibility. But there's a lot of ladies on this job, a lot of female officers that struggle being single parents, having autistic children at home, children with special needs, having to balance that out. There is no comparison for me as opposed to my colleagues. They come in every day with a smile on their face, lace up those boots, and go right out there onto patrol, never complaining. And it's not until you have a conversation, you know, in the locker room or something, where you start to realize just how much everyone really is balancing, whether it's caretaking, homeschooling, caring for the elderly. You know, it really is, and I commend the ladies for the past year being able to do all this, you know, making sure the kids are logged in the morning, then running to work. It hasn't been an easy time, and I really do believe that, you know, like Cole said, sometimes our side of it, or you know, humanizing the badge, like we like to say, right, is not always an easy task, because I think people do know that we have lives and children, families that love us and care for us outside of, you know, work. But once you put this uniform on, it's a total different view of how they see you out in the street. You know, it really is work, but I believe the heart of many of our officers are in the right place to be able to, like Cole said, see us go to the next level, see us, you know, propel forward and do something greater in this city. So I know the best is yet to come.
Thank you. Dom, you come out of the academy and you're expected to know everything.
Right.
But the reality is you don't. No one can know everything. You work in East Harlem.
Right.
What's this past year been like for you? And now, as we move into 2021, as you hear all this about reform, what does that mean to you?
First of all, I think like everybody, this last year or so has seemed like 10 years. It's been difficult trying to balance things. People expect me to have all of the answers sort of all of the time. That front-facing part of the government that people see a lot of the time. You know, in terms of reform, it's interesting. I have my foot in a lot of different places. I'm openly gay on the department. My husband is a person of color. I'm also a police officer. I've been on the job almost 14 years. And so I try to balance all of those things. I see things from multiple perspectives. The perspective of a police officer, the perspective that my husband sees things from. What does reform mean to me? That's a very good question. And I'm waiting to see how it all plays out.
I'm definitely going to have to stay with you for a second.
Sure, sure. I just see things from so many different sides, and it's not just my side as a police officer. It's not just what my husband sees. I deal with this stuff sort of on a daily basis, and I watch the same news that everybody else watches.
Yeah.
I have the same concerns that everybody has, the people that I police, as well as my family members. So, you know, I'm not exactly sure what police reform means. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wish I had that answer.
That's fair. That's
You
fair.
know, I wish I knew how to make it better for everybody, but that's I think the ultimate goal is that we want to make this better for everybody, for the people that put the badge on and for the people that are living in these communities.
Just if I could poll everyone, who's undergone implicit bias training? Through the implicit bias training.
We've done that.
Did you go?
This is a few years ago, right?
A couple of years ago, yeah, yep. So when you talk about implicit bias and, you know, what you're subconsciously maybe leading you in one direction, I think people have that too. And they hear cop and they think, oh, well, that's a cop, whether it's a male or female cop. This is what they must think, not realizing that we're conflicted at times too.
Yeah.
And you brought up do you find like conflict within your house on that, or?
Sure. I mean, I see things that happen on the news, and my husband and I will debate different things because I see things from sort of a law perspective and a police perspective, and then we talk, and then I see things from his perspective, Oftentimes when I'm out and about, particularly at work, people think I'm just a regular white guy from Long Island.
Yeah.
I'm also a first-generation American. So, in the last year, I think every one of those things has come up in some way or another when talking about police reform.
Well, they think you're a member of the NRA, you must have voted for Trump,
Right.
and they could tick off 10 things, but
Exactly.
the truth is, we're all individual people, right? That raise your right hand and to swear an oath. But we bring with it our strengths and our weaknesses, I would argue.
I think, well, if I could just jump on what he's saying, I think people forget that we're human. They
That's
forget,
right.
they think that we're just bred somewhere. They don't realize I'm you.
That's right.
I born in Brooklyn, I grew up in the inner city, I grew up in the development, I grew up in the projects, but I strive to do better. It's all about building. Everything is relevant, and they forget that I'm you. I'm Hispanic also. I've had the pleasure of being president of the largest fraternal organization in the police department, where you're dealing with now, we're minorities also. So people forget that we're you. They just don't understand that, we're bound by protecting the laws of the state of New York. So we're coming to you at your worst moment. It's not, nobody ever calls a cop, calls 911 and say, oh, come over, I'm having a nice day.
I wish they did. I wish they did.
It's might be major
Yeah.
or minor. It's something that's most important to them, and they're dealing with something now, and we have to adapt. They forget that we have to, as police officers, sometimes we're counselors, sometimes we're priests, sometimes we're psychologists. We have to explain the law to them, civil law, criminal law. Sometimes we have to affect
Sometimes
arrests.
we make mistakes.
And we make mistakes.
Yeah.
We're human.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's right. Rob, what do you think? I'd like to ask you, and I want to go, Rochelle, to you next, so I'm giving you a little advance notice, but last summer, dealing with the protests and how that was for you. But Rob, whether it's the protests last summer or dealing with that, what was good and bad? What was your takeaways?
I think, it's a blessing that we all get to be here and have this conversation, because we all have different, varied perspectives, different walks of life, whatever it is, but we're all the same at the same time. We have an opportunity to make a difference, right? We have an opportunity to show our humanity, and we have to take that responsibility. That's a charge. That's a beautiful thing to be able to do. What does that look like right now? It's about connecting with people, on some level, connecting with people. I work in the South Jamaica houses as an NCO. My partner and I have been there for a few years, and our approach down there was we have to connect with people. We know the good guy, bad guy thing, we know the cops and robbers thing, but we have to connect with people. And the first thing we did was connect with kids. All right, through the kids, we connected with the parents, from the parents to the grandparents, to the politicians, to the principals, et cetera. And people started to, they let their guard down. Like, you're different. Not really, we're really not different. You're just getting to see a side that you never either were shown or never paid attention to before. So I'm really just like you. I have the same views on some things just like you do, but I do have a job to do. And I would hope that you could understand that regardless of where our friendships might go, that there is a job that needs to be done, that is a vital job. Do we always make mistakes? Sometimes we could, yeah, we definitely make mistakes. We don't always get it perfect. But having that connection and showing that humanity, I think, is a tremendous bridge to letting people see, like, you know what, maybe we need to let down the guard a little bit and see what it's like to be a cop for a minute.
You said you were an NCO for a couple of years, right? We started that program, you're right, last year seems like it was 10 years, but probably 3 or 4 years ago, right, at this point. It all seemed that it went away real quick last year, those relationships we had built, right? What's your takeaway, or Rochelle, your takeaway?
I can say this.
Maybe it would have been worse if we didn't have those relationships.
I do think that, actually, that you mentioned that. We had people checking on us, calling us, saying, hey, bro, you good?
Yeah.
Like, no, we're good. Like, our community partner, this guy, Larry Washington, phenomenal gentleman, literally calling, checking on us. I ended up with COVID. They called and checked on me. Like, that wasn't there before. So when things started to get kind of crazy, people were like, don't think that we look at you and your partner that way, because that's not the case. So don't think you have to come down here different than you were last summer. You're the same, we see you the same. What's going on there is different. It has nothing to do with our relationship, because we have a relationship. What's happening down there is an expression, and it's a reaction more
What
than—
do you mean by down there?
Like in the city,
Yeah.
with all the protests. that's a reaction more than a response, you know, in their opinion, and I can understand that. So had we not had the ability to bridge that gap early with the NCO program, I think it could have been, we'd be in a much worse situation now than we are. You know, where we are is fairly, is doing pretty well, and the relationships are still intact, and there's a lot of hope where we are too,
Yeah.
which we don't want to lose that hope, you know?
Yeah. Rochelle, last year, did you work the protests?
Yes.
How was that for you?
It was very emotional. So I have a 14-year-old son, and of course we went onto the 12-hour tours, we went onto the no RDLs, and that was hard because it's summertime, the kids are out, you know, you want to spend your RDLs, you want to spend your days off with your family, and the days are going and you just can't, right? You see winter coming. It was very emotional for me in terms of being a black woman, being a black officer, a black supervisor, and of course walking alongside the protesters, and there were people who would come up to me and say, you know, thank you so much for being here. And then there were also other people calling me names and, you know, saying that I'm a sellout and,
Yeah.
you know, I'm with the other people, and just like making certain
You were a
comments.
sergeant at the time?
Yes. So it's definitely something that, you know, challenged me emotionally. And one of the good things that I have a good support system at home, but I also have my support system at the precinct. So yeah, we will go walk a couple miles with the protesters, but we get back in the van, you know, 8, 10 of us, and, you know, we just kind of cheer each other up. And that is one thing that I will always cherish, is coming to work and having to go to those protesters, is that having, you know, the other officers with me. And yes, we're going through everything, but
Together.
at the end of it, we just make a good day out of it.
I had some notes here, and you just said the word that I wanted to talk about, support.
Yeah.
And to anyone here, do you feel supported? That could be pointed at me, at the upper echelon of the police department. It could be pointed at your, as you said, your coworkers. How about New York City as a whole? What went through your mind last year or now? Like you said you're not sure what reform really means. It's got to play out. But talk about, you know, where you are professionally, personally, on the job, being a police officer off duty. Do you think you're supported now?
Honestly, no. I think it's, you know, as a police officer, I think we're all hurt by everything's going on. I don't think any police officer goes out there and doesn't want to do a good job, doesn't want to do better for their communities that they work in. I just feel we're at a time where let's talk about government, not really the police department, because you're bound by the laws that they made and you have to just work along. But I feel going down from the governors to the city council and the laws that they're making and the direction that they're going to, they're not focusing on reform. They're focusing on the police department. And if we're talking about reform, it's everything. It should be the bail reform bills. It should be the diaphragm bills. It should be, you know, everything that's going on now. They're worried more about a narrative than about reform. It should be everything. If, you know, there's always room for improvement in anything that we do. But I feel right now we have no support from our government. And in turn, it handcuffs the police department. So, like I said, I've been on 27 years. The 27 years, and I've worked with some of the best executives, and I've sat down and I've gone to contact. It's all about strategy. There's never one moment that a command or a precinct commander or cops or even the NCOs or the people on patrol are worried about strategy, how to be able to handle their job and go home safely. So I think it's coming to the point where you're being handcuffed and you're scared. Because people don't realize that when cops go to work, like we were talking about mistakes, we have 1 foot inside a jail cell and 1 foot out for 8.5 hours till you go home. And you go your career like that. And that's stress that people don't realize that we have. One mistake, we're going to jail. We're losing our jobs. We're losing everything that we work for. We're getting sued. You're willing to lose everything. So as much as police officers, we love the city, and we love policing in the state that we live in, but we don't feel that love back. So it's scary to see with 27 years that I've dedicated to the city, in a flash of a second, I'm gonna have nothing. So, you know, I think that's what people don't understand. You know, no one knows what it is to go to a 911 call with a man with a gun. It could be nothing or it could be something. So, you know, I think the community sometimes doesn't understand the job that we do and how we do it. I think they want to be there to complain instead of being there alongside with us all the time. Because I'll have conversations with people in the community, and I say, well, you have an outlet. We have community council meetings. When's the last time you've been to a community council meeting? We have the NCO Build-A-Block meetings. When's the last time you do that? So you can't be there when you don't like something. You have to be there when you do like something. So it's all the time.
Any other differing thoughts?
Yeah. This past summer was really difficult for me because we are just barely over 50 years since Stonewall happened. That was a protest, a violent protest that sparked gay rights in this country. And I can see the similarities. I can see the frustration and the things that people are looking for out of the city, out of the government, and out of their police officers. What I wish people could understand a little bit more is that in some of these neighborhoods, we are doing the best that we can with the resources that we have. I want officers to know that even the people that are protesting, all they want is to feel safe in their own neighborhood. And I think that looks different. It looks different from us, and it looks different from them on their side. I wish that more people would show up to NCO meetings and community council meetings. I also think partially that it's not necessarily their job to do that. Their job is to live in their community. Their job is to go to work and feel safe and have their children grow up in their community. You know, working down at some of the protests, I don't want to get hit with a bottle. I want to be safe. I want every single one of you guys to be safe. I want the executives to be safe, who, for the first time in my career, I saw actually out on the front lines, you know, in some cases getting injured, and really putting themselves out there for something that they believe in. But we have to stop this sort of us versus them mentality. We really are all the same.
Who's us and them?
The community and the police.
Yeah.
And it really isn't. We all come from all different walks of life, and you know, in the last year or so, we went from people sort of loving the police and first responders to kind of protesting at the same time. In East Harlem, I'm still getting the 7 o'clock pots and pans and everybody coming out to shout for us, and I hit the sirens and the lights, and people go crazy because they love it. They want us there. They want us to protect them. So I just wish that people would understand that. I wish police officers would understand that as well, is that the same people that are criticizing us also want us, and they want us to police them in the same way that we police everywhere else.
Well,
And
I think that's well said, and I think it's real important for people to ignore the immediate response and instead listen to what was just said and try to view it from their viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Right? And one of the things I've heard all over the city is, we understand what you're saying, Larry. We understand that. We get it. We love our cops. But why can't you admit it? I picked on you already. Cole, why can't you admit it when you see a cop do something wrong? Why do all cops band around and protect that cop? Why don't you just call it out? Didn't you see that video? Right? That's what you hear over and over. So what about that? I'm putting you on the spot.
No, appreciate the opportunity, Commissioner.
It's only your career, don't worry.
No, I think first and foremost, we have to dispel that misconception, because I don't think it's said enough. No one hates a bad cop more than a good cop, and I can't emphasize that enough. But I can say that unequivocally, and we have to do something to disrupt that. And I don't know, if that's in the form of form of a disruptive communication model, and by disruptive, I mean purely in the sense of innovative. How can we challenge our existing communication models to better reach and disseminate all the good work that's going on to reach our audience, whether that's implicit, bias training, the neighborhood coordination program, we're fundamentally transforming the way we interact with our community, the way we cultivate relationships of trust, mutual respect, seeing our common humanity. And I know a lot of people, I mentioned this earlier, they're yearning for that way to connect. That information isn't reaching out to as many as we'd like to see. I know there is a concerted effort in the department each and every day to try to spread the news of what we're doing. And I think, Commissioner, you'll be the first to acknowledge, we acknowledge our mistakes. We own our history. But at the same time, if we're so fixated on the mistakes of the past and the people aren't willing to work with us on moving forward together, that's problematic in and of itself. So, it's about reaching out, but I want to emphasize it can't be the singular responsibility of the police department. It can't be just on us to bear the onus of bridging gaps and building relationships. We, as an NCO, I'm out there, my unit, we're posting hundreds of flyers. We're knocking on doors, inviting people to attend our Build the Block meetings. We're saying hello, we're saying good morning, trying to start relationships, but that has to be reciprocal. That has to be reciprocated back. If people don't want, we can't force anyone to have a conversation with us. We can't force anyone to attend our Build the Block meeting. So I don't know, if it's a way of collaborating with our intergovernmental agencies. How do we enhance civic engagement? But it has to be a multifaceted approach, and we can't just bear the sole responsibility in this. It has to be all of us together.
Cole, you and Rob, both NCOs, two different parts of the city, and that's the beautiful thing about New York City. You go from Staten Island to Jamaica, completely different, right? What's the most rewarding part of your job as an NCO? And then what's the most frustrating?
Most rewarding is, again, getting to meet the people that I've met, right? It'll change your perspective on things, getting to see what people deal with and people getting to see what you deal with. Again, once you have that no longer, officer-citizen relationship, now it's a friendship, people get to see and empathize with our struggles, but also we get to empathize with their struggles too. And then you start to work from a place of your heart, right? Not just your duty, which you're always going to do, but you get to really emphasize your heart and work from a place of passion, which is really coming from people, right? We really are here to help people. We see what we're dealing with every day across the nation, and it's not easy to be a cop right now, but we still do it every day because we're doing it for people, right? Because that people could be my mom, could be your mom, it could be anybody. Having that ability has been tremendously rewarding. On the same token, what could be frustrating is a lot of people feel reserved in expressing that. They feel, X, Y, and Z, and I can understand that also. But if you embolden yourself and you step out just a little bit, even with a hello, even with, whatever it is, picking up a cup of coffee for somebody that you see, asking somebody if they're okay. Those little, and cops do that all the time. People don't see it. I wish people would see that more, that we do make that effort, that we do genuinely care. It's not just a 9 to 5 thing. We go home, we unplug, because you don't really unplug. Because policing is 24 hours. The people that you love and care for are doing this 24 hours a day throughout the nation. We really don't get a reprieve when we go home. It's not, we're done. Our tour is done, but our brother's picking up his tour now.
Yeah.
So that's a little frustrating, I think.
So prior NCO, it's been 2 years since I walked away from the program. While it is a good program, I still feel like officers need to be a little more in tune with that. It goes with the title, right? Neighborhood Coordination Officer. What I didn't realize was that I was doing that prior to having that title or wearing the breast bar. And I think if officers come to a realization that, yes, like you said, working in the community, building these relationships, looking at that person as someone's aunt, mother, child, I think we're just so wired to just keep going that we don't realize the impact that we have. Sometimes when I'm out in the street, I have to slow an officer down, right? And that's okay. Hey Larry, listen, I got this. We all have gifts and talents, and this is my favorite speech that I give everyone. We all have gifts and talents. Yours might be what mine isn't. What are your strengths? We go to a job, communication, if it's children, sometimes it depends on the officer. We have this facade that we have to be tough and that we have to go in there and know all the answers. Like you said, we don't have the answers, but you know what? We can try together. And I think officers need a little more understanding of what we are in the community, that you are vested. You might live upstate. I'm a Bronx cop, I still live in the Bronx. And there's a lot of those that you hear of that we're still vested in what's happening in our own areas. In the same areas that we're policing, we're also feeling the brunt of the stolen tires, the robberies, the gunpoint robberies, the spike in crime, sending our children to the corner store. And, so we're all still living in those same times in that era. So I know one of the main things that everyone's talking about now is, having officers that have to be, living within the 5 boroughs. I believe right now 60% of us still live in the 5 boroughs. So what more, like you said, I think it's a collective effort on both ends. It's not something that just PD has to fix, right? Not just NYPD, but it has to be a collective effort along with the community. Yes, the NCOs are great, but I'm sure you guys can vouch that it's the same people that you see over and over again, the same rabbis, the same imams, right? The same preachers, the same bishops. Why? Because they literally care and they have a heartbeat for the people in the city. How do we get that same heartbeat from our officers, but also from the community? Because if we're doing the same thing over and over with the same people, to this day, like you said, I get phone calls all the time from, prior community contacts, hey, Erica, right? First name basis, how are you? How's your family? That's big. But I would love for other officers to be able to be humanized the way that we have. Being NCO 3-4 years, doing the same routine, dealing with the same people, it's...
I got 3 topics
Uh-oh.
then. You just mentioned,
I didn't open it up.
you just mentioned crime, that's on the table. Trust, what are we doing or what are we not doing that we should be doing? When I came in, I identified, because I just think it's the right thing, and we're trying to break the cycle of violence and investing in kids, and we're putting more energy and time than ever before probably with kids. COVID definitely got in the way somewhat, but rebuilding trust that's been lost. Crime is another piece that you just mentioned, and the third one will come back to me, but anyone else, other thoughts that you may have? Do you find yourself getting blamed for rising crime?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think, Larry?
I think everything that goes wrong, we're just a natural place to go to, because what are we doing about it? Well, we're doing something about it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm talking about that, like I was talking about strategy. Like yourself as an example, I'm surprised you even get an opportunity to sleep. You're constantly with your commanders, and people don't realize that it's relative, and it trickles down. It starts from you, and it goes to your precinct commanders, and it goes down, and you're constantly strategizing, you're analyzing, you're investing time, and you're working with the community. But in the end, it's still gonna point to us, because what are we doing about it? But like we were talking about reform, it's gonna be collective. It's not just the activists. We need the community that's quiet, that really want us there and thank us for the jobs like they thank them every day. So we need them to stand up. And I think where you're going back to is talking about support. I think police officers in general are looking for the community to stand up and to stand with the police department and say, listen, this is not right. We need to amend these laws to make sure these violent felons stay in jail. We need to attack this reform bill and make sure that if they really are guilty of this crime, that they get the penalty that they deserve. So everything is relative. So when we talk about that, I feel that it's more than that. And the only way we're gonna get reform is if the community stands with the police department and says, okay, listen, we don't like the direction that you're going. We need to fix this properly, not ignore it, but fix it properly. Maybe wording in a law where, like the diaphragm bill, whereas you're saying immediately as you put pressure on someone. People forget that when you're dealing with somebody, placing them on, they don't want to get arrested. Sometimes they're violent. They've done prior time. They don't want to go back there. People don't understand what they're thinking at that moment. So their tendency is don't touch me. But you have to control the situation. Otherwise, you're going to be the one that goes to the hospital, or someone's going to get hurt. So you have to control the situation. So if simple wording in the diaphragm bill would, after they're placed in custody, you corrected a problem. Now police officers aren't scared where they're not thinking of using their tactics properly to control a situation. So like I said, constant fear of one foot in a jail cell, one foot not. You know, so one foot in, one foot out the door. So I think those are the problems, and if the community really stands up and understands where we're coming from, which they don't at times, I think they do, but till you walk in our shoes, you don't know where we're coming from.
There's a two concepts, and I'll throw out. One dealing with discipline. In a lot of meetings that I've sat in the last 6 months, 10 months, there's definitely a perception that there is no discipline in the NYPD. Cops are running around, captains, sergeants, you can do whatever you want. I know that's not the truth, but that's one thing. I see a lot of laughing, but perception becomes reality. Didn't somebody here say that? Was it Dom? Was it you? Or Cole? Somebody said that before. And then with the NCOs, it's more than NCOs. It's a department-wide job to serve, to get to know the public, to be there for the public. They don't call us when things are well. Maybe that's part of the problem. But there's a certain bond that when they need help, we're going to come and we're going to be there for them. But the reality is, we're not just showing up half the time to say, hey, how's things going? Well, there's a balance there. I think we could probably do better in that respect. It's got to be felt beyond just NCOs, to me. It's got to permeate to rank and file in sector cars, et cetera. What do you think on any of that?
But I think it does, because you have your steady
Good.
sectors that have their community time. You have your, there's involvement. It's oversight. You know, like I said, everything is relative. It's strategy, and you have your supervisors. Like, if she was an NCO, so she would ensure that NCOs were doing their community visits, and the steady sectors were doing. Everything is accounted for. So it's
You
not
agree?
just that.
I kind of want to go back to what she said
Go where
in
you
terms
want.
of, and touch on what you said in terms of, she said like other officers should feel what she feel when she's getting those phone calls from when she was an NCO. And I think that's important. Yes, we have like the steady sectors. We do have the NCOs that go out, but those are the people that they see, right? They constantly see the same officers, and that's great. But there are other officers that might want to have, get those good praises as well. And when that steady sector is unavailable or not there, they're going to encounter other officers. They're going to encounter, response order officers. So I don't know. I think maybe some kind of way there that, yes, the response orders, they kind of handle a lot of the stuff so that the steady sectors could, do their community visits. But the response orders as well, they need to also have those connections. It shouldn't just be that some officers have, make these connections. These response orders should also be making some level of connections as well. Whether it's within a particular
Dom's
sector
earlier
or-
point, I think it was Dom, the public shouldn't have to worry about being safe. They should just go out and be safe.
Yeah.
They shouldn't worry about who's showing up when they call 911. It should be that uniform, that patch, and they're going to be treated,
Yes.
right, as they should. And I think they are. Not perfect. What you kind of laughed when I mentioned discipline. It's not a free-for-all in the NYPD. Cops aren't doing whatever they want. What do you think of the discipline in the NYPD? Too much or too little?
It could be all over the place. To be honest with me, I think it'd be all over the place. Some things where, I get told like okay. So some things that I feel like
All right, the Facebook is now starting.
that I could get in trouble for. I'm not going to say that it's something that's not important, but I think that if I am taking, as a supervisor, if I'm handling something that's pertinent, that's right in front of me, that's way more important, and I don't get to something in a certain time, that I shouldn't be like threatened with discipline for something that is not a priority.
Yeah.
And it's not a priority, as in it's not even a 911 issue. So stuff like that brings a lot of pressure. Same thing with the officers. We've been having the issues with like the 311 systems, and my officers on my platoon, they complain to me, they talk to me a lot about it. Like it really sucks. And I know if I'm a community member, if I'm living in that community and I call 911, there's a reason why I call 911 over calling 311. So I understand that certain things that may not get handled at a certain time, but priority. I think we need to go back to focusing on priority. And, you know, threatening like discipline and stuff like that. So not to say, it's one thing if something is done as egregious, like you just don't go to a job or you just don't try. But when you can see that your officers are trying, I think they should be recognized for that. Because it definitely does something to morale.
That's fair.
You know, it's funny because we all police in different areas, right? So when he started talking about banging the pots and pans, I mean, as a Bronx cop, we never got to experience that other than seeing it on TV. You know, so it is a very diverse city, and you know, it brings us all walks of life together. I mean, just look at each and every one of us here. You know, hearing your background, you know, Mexican American, you know, sitting here amongst you, you know, making our families proud and taking pride in when we put on this badge, but also knowing that there's a work to be done across the board. You know, when you talk about discipline, a lot of, and even now, you know, like Larry said, there's a lot that goes into play. It's not just a 9 to 5, I go to work, put a pen to paper, and no, we're dealing with people's lives. We're dealing with priority jobs. We're dealing with the back end of it, and then also dealing with, you know, with each other, because when you walk into the precincts, you see the long faces. You know that there's cops that are struggling. You know that there's things that need to be done and bettered for us, but it's not going to be done today. So strap your boots on and let's go. And then, so I feel like sometimes we just kind of push those things to the back so we can continue to go forward. And it's a selfish job, right? Because at the end of the day, when we go out there, we're thinking of our families, but we're really not thinking of our families. Because if we do, we put our emotions on our sleeve and we can't focus. And then that's where mistakes and things happen where, like you said, you can lose your job. I think if people realized how much there is to be lost when we take the oath, right? You know, even the recruits that are coming in, they're taking this oath, 20-nothing-year-olds, I like to call them that because I have 20-nothing-year-olds myself, but 20-nothing-years-old, and it's like, wow, is this, you know, sometimes you want to, is this really what you want to do? Like, live life first and then come back in your 30s, or, you know, because there's a lot on the line. There's a lot of responsibility. You know, people think it's just strapping on this gun and, you know, going out, like you said, gun ho, you know, and there's no accountability. There's a lot in place in the NYPD that we know that, you know, there's just certain things you don't cross. And I watched one of your series when you had the Garner family and, you know, some bishops and
Bishop
preachers
Foy,
and
yes. Reverend McCall.
And, you know, it was very interesting. And I think the community and everyone appreciates the fact that you can have these open forums and be able to put it out on the table to say, you know what, yes, that's how you think. Yes, that's, you know what, you know, our bad, or, you know, maybe that was a mistake that was made, but let's go forward so that we can correct these things. And seeing the hurt on both sides and listening to, you know, your community leaders and knowing what they have to deal with, and, you know, and them also being on the front line, right? Because people call pastors, preachers, imams when they're at their worst, you know, funerals, COVID, all these things, you know. So I think, again, going back to people humanizing us and realizing, just as you're dealing with COVID, how many of us have struggled, right? We just had someone in PSA 7, you know, pass from COVID. That's right up the block from us. You know, these are company mates. These are people that you share intimate things with and see each other on a daily basis, you know? And so seeing all these things come into place, I think it's fair to say, you know, like many of you did, there's a work to be done on all ends.
It's empathy. Everybody's kind of saying it without saying the word empathy, but it is. It's, you know, people are looking for us to empathize with them and their situations amongst ourselves within our commands. We're looking for empathy. We want people to understand how difficult it is for us to do our job in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of having families with all different situations and children at home of all different ages. And empathy is something that I think we're all craving. Even in terms of, like, you know, discipline, there's so much discipline on this job. It's like an onion. It's layers from different agencies internally. Do
you worry about it?
I would be wrong to say that it never crosses my mind when I handle a job. I want to always make sure that I'm handling the job correctly within our own department guidelines. I also want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing when I'm out there and I'm not just trying to tick off boxes. I try to remember that whether I'm dealing with a person that's in some type of crisis or whether I'm at a heavy job, that the person that's in front of me ultimately could be my own family member. And so the first thing in my mind is to do right by them, but it would be wrong to say that I never think about our discipline, and it's kind of all encompassing sometimes when you start to get into the federal monitor, and we also have our own internal affairs and inspections and our own sergeants, and now we have
sergeants.
damn sergeants. Now I think we're feeling some pressure from district attorneys' offices and things, and that definitely plays into the decisions we make for sure.
Tom, you thought, and I'll go anywhere to answer it, but you talked about empathy, and there's a culture though in policing. And Eric, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you put up a stone veneer, right? Because that shields you from everything you're going to see. I think one of the things people don't understand, and it's not an excuse, but you don't understand sometimes what police officers may see in an 8-hour shift. Sometimes in a 30-minute span of chasing somebody down the block and getting hurt, or God forbid, seeing a child deceased, to a husband or a wife that beats each other up, and then the next thing, go handle the dispute at the fruit stand over a stolen apple, right? And you're taking everything with you from job to job. And you're also, you can't show weakness. That's the culture. Maybe it's wrong. But what do you think? You think that gets in the way?
I go out of my way.
It prevents us from having those connections you're talking about.
I go out of my way to check on cops, right? God put something on my heart, and I go talk to them. All right, go talk to them. Because we all go through things. Never mind just the job, we go through life, divorces, miscarriages. We're human. And if it's going to take a while to build that empathetic base where people can see us as that human thing if they don't already. But with internally taking care of each other, especially in a time like this, is never been more crucial. Having the ability to take care of each other and not feel some sort of way like I can't talk. No, you can. If you don't want to talk to them, talk to me. Whatever it is. But you have to have that connection base, because this job is a tough job. But God builds you a certain way that you can carry this type of responsibility. But you also need to understand your humanity too. A lot of young 20-nothings will come on and not realize that there's a certain point that you can't carry things anymore. And that can get disastrous. That can really get disastrous personally and professionally. And you have to know, you have to live a little while to see what your limit is and what your brothers and sisters' limits are, and be able to intercede and go, hey, I got you today. How's your wife doing? You need a babysitter? Me and my wife will take your kids. You guys can work it out. Whatever it is, that's something that maybe the civilian world doesn't really understand that we do also.
Yeah. Any thoughts, or I'll just move on?
It's funny that you said that, because what I've gotten into the habit of doing is I'll go, I'll run the reports in the morning, and I'll see what were the heavy jobs that came over yesterday. And we have officers that just had a baby, right? And they responded the day before to a baby they couldn't save. So now how does that officer feel as a dad, right? Take away the human side of it. Now you go home, you almost feel guilty that you get to go home to your baby and this person didn't. So, checking in on each other is big. That's one of the things that I've learned to do.
I was at a conference today, and it was military people talking about coming back from war and walking through the airport 10 hours after being in a war zone and now going home. And as he was telling the story, I was very thankful to the military men and women for their service, but I was thinking in my head, that's what cops go through. I'm not saying they're in a war zone, but at times where they have to leave a really stressful job and then go home and be the coach for their kids, or take their beautiful baby to the doctor, and it's tough at times. And I don't think people realize all that.
Well, I'll tell you this, October 6, 1998, 15, 20 hours, I respond to a 54 of an aided of a baby, 39 Auburn. Day of my birthday, I should have took it off. I had to take this kid to the hospital, he died. 7 months old. Now I gotta tell a 18-year-old kid that your baby just didn't survive because we're in the ER. My birthday has not been the same.
And years later, right? Yeah. Yep, and I think we probably all have those stories. Yep.
We go through that sometimes, all just within 1 day of work. You can be, like you said, at a dispute dealing with people that are fighting. You could be racing to a shots fired job, and the next thing you're at a lift job with an elderly person that fell down. And all of that stress and adrenaline is still running through you. And then in the same time, I did midnights for almost 10 years. The daytime rolls around and you have kids out on the street going to school, and
Yes.
they're waving at you, and you just trying to comprehend like this
Yep.
entire day of events.
Yes.
And sometimes it, like you said, but it all happens in 1 day, 1 8.5-hour period.
And experience, I think, plays a role too. And you mentioned young people coming on the job, and I don't think you know everything then that you know now, for sure. And it's a fascinating. I got a 10-minute warning. I'm going to ask a hard question. Anyone, maybe not you. Would you take this job again if you were starting over?
Absolutely.
You would.
I would.
Why?
I started this job when I was 19 years old. I was a civilian before I became a cop. So I was a civilian for 5 years. I was a PAA, and then I was an investigator at APD. And I started processing for this job the same time I started processing for FBI. FBI was my dream job. FBI forensic accountant, went to school, did the master's for it and everything. And I don't know what it was, but I chose to stay. And I will not change that decision for anything. Absolutely love what I do. More good days than bad days. I laugh, especially in the 4-3. I laugh every day.
Could you imagine working with better people?
In the 4-3, no.
No.
I have an amazing platoon. I really have to shout out my platoon. I have an amazing platoon. They really, wait, I just have to say, so I graduated with my master's in criminal justice in December. And a few weeks ago, thank you. So a few weeks ago, they did like, there's obviously no graduation ceremony. They did a surprise graduation ceremony for me, and amazing. Amazing. They started singing the theme song as I walked in. I had no clue what was happening. And they got me really good. But I will not change.
Cole, any regrets?
No, without question.
It's 50-50 if I'm going to be very honest. I wouldn't want to miss out on any of the experiences, but then
That's
to
fair.
have that experience, you also have to have that stress.
Yeah.
So, the stress, so it's like a 50-50. Would I take it? Probably, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to miss out on what I missed out on. We've gotten to experience some amazing things,
Yeah.
marching down Fifth Avenue during the St. Patty's Parade, just we get to see and do some incredible things, but the trade-off is there's some pretty incredible things you got to deal with on the other side too. So that's a tough question.
That's fair. Don?
I would take this job again in a heartbeat, to be honest with you. I've wanted to be a cop since I was a little kid. I had a DARE officer when I was in junior high and high
Isn't
school.
that funny? Yeah.
And he made such an impression on me. And as I've handled jobs and been around a couple of different commands, the connections that I make with just sort of everyday people, just different jobs, there's nothing like that experience of having that connection with somebody, being able to actually help them, whatever it is, whether it's arresting the bad guy or helping them off the floor or just helping them get to school. There's something about that makes you feel so good. It almost is a high in a way. And I don't know if I could give that up, to be honest with you.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I take it in a heartbeat. I only have 7 years on. I came on very late in the game. I was 35 when I came on, so I was like the grandma in the company, running around.
That's young.
Running around with the 20-nothing-year-olds.
That's young.
trying to get over that wall. I never exercised a day in my life until then. But if it's in you, it's a passion of yours, and you love what you do, I would take it in a heartbeat. Absolutely.
How about you, Larry?
I'm in his boat. I'm 50-50. It has been the pleasure of my life to serve the city.
You said you grew up, right?
Grew up in,
in housing?
This is all I ever wanted to do growing up, and it's one of the reasons.
Family before, or you're
No,
the first?
I'm the first. My housing cop, his name was Cooper, knocking me in the head all the time. I said, I want to be like him when I grow up. You know, he kept me in line, I'll be honest with you. It was like having another father out there. You know, he grabbed me by the ear, don't do this, get over here, don't do that. All right, all right, good job. And, you know,
Yeah.
when I had the pleasure of graduating, going to PSA 3 and say, hey, I'm on now. Okay. The day
Did he
pushed me
remember
around.
you?
Yeah, he did.
That's-
Yeah, he said, the job has gone down now. But he gave me a big hug and congratulated me. And like I said, as far as a career, I've had a wonderful career. I've had the pleasure working the 8-8 and the 7-7 and watch these communities grow. And that's been a pleasure to see a neighborhood that with gentrification has turned into amazing places
Yes.
to live.
Yeah.
As far as the other side, like you said, with great, having the ability to see great things happen, you have to deal with the flip side, which are the bad things. Those are the things that, 9/11, being on the World Trade Center, the bucket brigades, things like that. I really don't want to have to relive that again, but but I definitely would do it again.
I would say, and we got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to just ask you, moving forward, what would you say to the people in New York City, or to your coworkers? But before that, to answer your question, in case you're wondering, I'd take the job again in a heartbeat. This job's given me more, than I could ever repay, and there's been a lot of bad days. So I know what you mean. There's been a lot of worried days, nothing worse than when we've lost people. But there's been so many good days and so many encounters where you influence and have an impact on people's lives. And that's the adrenaline, that's the rush. So trial started today for the murder of George Floyd. We're preparing internally. We're doing a tabletop tomorrow. What do we do? Other protests? How are we mobilizing resources? Are we going to go to 12-hour tours? What are we going to do? But what would you say to the people of New York City, whether it's at this month or for the next 2 or 3 years, as we try to move the city forward? Any thoughts? We got
this. We're New York strong. We can only go forward. We can't look back, and we can't look at anything other than in front.
We need the help
So
too.
we got that.
I'm sorry?
We need the help too.
Yeah.
We definitely need the help of the people. of the
Absolutely,
city.
we do.
We can't do this alone. We
Yeah.
could do a lot. We're the best department in the world, and we're capable of a lot. But without the people of New York,
You can't police people. It's got to be together, right? And it's got to be people. Yep. We got 2 minutes left. Rochelle, anything?
For me, I'll just say be patient and, understand the process of everything, of what we do as a police department, of what happens when people go to trial and everything, but just be patient and understand the process and trust the process.
And Cole?
I would say we can't do it alone. We need your help. And I would just quickly mention, under your leadership commission.
You can take your time.
I appreciate.
You can have the last word.
I appreciate, and I can't tell you how profound the impact is. Under your leadership, elevating leaders in this department who truly embody and exemplify the core values of the city, who represent this city. That goes a long way in restoring trust and fundamentally changing the way we operate as a department. I think the aphorism really encapsulates the situation. Personnel is policy. And you've done a tremendous job of ensuring that that is the case. I can tell you firsthand my lived experience in the 120 precinct as a police officer. We have a leader, our CEO, Deputy Inspector Kinsella.
Tanya. Yeah.
When you have a leader who truly just immerses herself in the work, who's out there every day cultivating these relationships with the community, who is able to maintain that long-standing objective and that vision of the goals of the department as a visionary, and is holding officers and herself to that standard of excellence that inspires me as a cop to want to hold myself to that same standard, that changes the overall environment, that changes the tonality, that changes the fundamental perspective of the cop coming into work every day. And I think you've just done an incredible job, and I don't think it's emphasized enough of truly guiding the city under your leadership, of elevating the leaders that's going to take the police department to the level that we want to get to. And we have those leaders thanks to your leadership in every command in the city. So I personally want to say thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Cole. Any last word?
We're trying our best. We're all getting up every day and going out there and doing the best that we can to make this city the best that it can be. So that's
Amen. Amen. Larry?
Just want to reiterate, just like the good sergeant said, she hit the nail on the head. Be patient, trust the process, and help us help you. And we
Trust
go
is a
forward.
two-way street there,
Yes.
right? That's what you may hear too. We're wrapping up here. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. These are your police officers, and they're the best people in the world. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And to each one of you, thank you for what you do. And I mean it, and stay safe. God bless.